What happens when a beloved childhood icon sits down for what should be a routine promotional interview, only to find himself under attack from a host determined to tear down everything he stands for? What you're about to witness is one of the most uncomfortable television moments in recent memory, where politeness met aggression, where respect collided with ridicule, and where one man's dignity was pushed to its absolute breaking point. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about daytime television. Drop a comment below and let me know if you think Ralph handled this the right way. The morning started like any other at the View studio. Ralph Macchio had arrived early, dressed sharply in a navy blazer and crisp white shirt, ready to promote his latest project. The Karate Kid star, now in his 60s but still carrying that boyish charm that made him famous, was scheduled for a 7-minute segment that his publicist had assured him would be light and friendly. Joy Behar sat at the panel table, flipping through her notes with an expression that suggested she had other plans entirely. The other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Alyssa Farah Griffin, chatted casually among themselves, unaware of the storm that was about to unfold. "Ralph Macchio is here, everybody," Whoopi announced as the cameras rolled. "Star of The Karate Kid and Cobra Kai. Ralph, welcome back to The View." Ralph smiled warmly, settling into the guest chair. "Thank you so much for having me, Whoopi. It's always a pleasure to be here. So tell us about what you're working on now." Sarah Haynes jumped in with genuine enthusiasm. "Well, I'm actually developing a new series that explores mentorship through martial arts, but in a completely different way than what people might expect from me," Ralph began, his voice steady and professional. "It's about how we can use ancient wisdom to help modern kids deal with cyberbullying and social media pressure." Joy Behar leaned forward, her pen tapping against her notepad in a rhythm that seemed almost aggressive. "Ralph, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Don't you think it's a little irresponsible to keep promoting violence to children? I mean, here we are in a world where kids are shooting each other in schools, and you're still out here teaching them to fight." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Ralph's smile faltered slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Joy, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about what martial arts actually teaches. It's not about violence, it's about discipline, respect, and self-control." "Oh, please." Joy waved her hand dismissively. "That's just marketing speak. At the end of the day, you're teaching kids to hit people. How is that not promoting violence?" Whoopi shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Joy, I think Ralph is trying to explain that martial arts is more than just fighting." "I can speak for myself, Whoopi," Joy snapped, not taking her eyes off Ralph. "Ralph, you made millions of dollars off a movie where a kid learns to beat up other kids. Now you want to do it again. Don't you think it's time to move on from this whole karate thing?" Ralph took a deep breath, his hands clasped in his lap. "Joy, The Karate Kid wasn't about beating people up. It was about a young man learning to stand up to bullies and defend himself when necessary. The final tournament wasn't about aggression. It was about proving to himself that he could face his fears." "That's a nice way to spin it," Joy said with a smirk. "But let's be honest here. You peaked 40 years ago with one movie, and you've been riding that wave ever since. Don't you think it's time to accept that your 15 minutes are up?" The other hosts exchanged glances. Alyssa Farah Griffin looked visibly uncomfortable, while Sarah Haynes stared down at her hands. Whoopi opened her mouth to intervene, but Ralph held up a gentle hand. "Joy, I understand you might have strong feelings about this topic, but I'm not sure why you're being so hostile," Ralph said, his voice remaining calm despite the obvious tension. "I've been working professionally for over 40 years. I've been fortunate enough to be part of projects that have resonated with multiple generations." "Hostile?" Joy laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm being honest. Something most people in this industry aren't brave enough to do. You're a one-trick pony, Ralph. Karate Kid, Cobra Kai, now this new thing. It's all the same character, isn't it? The underdog who learns martial arts. How many times can you tell the same story? Actually, If you'd watched Cobra Kai, you'd know that my character Daniel has evolved significantly, Ralph replied, a slight edge creeping into his voice for the first time. He struggles with being a father, with running a business, with the consequences of his past actions. It's about growth and maturity. I tried to watch it, Joy said with exaggerated disgust. I made it through maybe 10 minutes before I had to turn it off. It's the same juvenile nonsense, just with older actors who should know better. Ralph's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Well, I'm sorry you didn't enjoy it. But millions of other people have found meaning in these stories, about perseverance and standing up for what's right. Standing up for what's right? Joy's voice grew louder. You mean standing up and punching people in the face? That's your version of what's right? I'm 7Ds, and I'm 7Ds? In a world where we're trying to teach our children that violence is never the answer? Joy, Whoopi finally interjected. I think you're mischaracterizing what Ralph is saying. Joy whirled toward Whoopi. Am I? Or am I the only one here, willing to ask the hard questions? We sit here every day talking about gun violence, about bullying, about toxic masculinity. And then we welcome someone who's made a career out of glorifying fighting. Ralph leaned forward slightly, his hands still clasped but his knuckles now white. Joy, have you ever actually studied martial arts? Have you spoken to children who practice karate, or taekwondo, or judo? I don't need to study it to know what it is, Joy shot back. It's organized violence with fancy uniforms and meaningless belts. It's a way for insecure people to feel powerful by learning how to hurt others. That couldn't be further from the truth, Ralph said, his voice growing firmer. Martial arts saved my life as a young person. It gave me confidence, discipline, and a sense of purpose. It taught me that true strength comes from restraint, not aggression. Joy rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, please. Spare us the after-school special speech. You were an actor who got cast in a movie. You didn't discover some mystical path to enlightenment through punching and kicking. The studio audience began to murmur uncomfortably. Ralph could hear whispers and shuffling in the seats behind him, but he kept his focus on Joy, who seemed to be enjoying his discomfort. Joy, I'm starting to wonder if there's something personal behind this attack, Ralph said quietly, because this feels like more than just a disagreement about a movie or a TV show. Joy's eyes flashed dangerously. Personal? You want to make this personal? I think you're a has-been who's desperately clinging to relevance by recycling the same tired story over and over again. I think you're taking advantage of nostalgia to make money off parents who want to relive their childhood through their kids. The other hosts sat in stunned silence. This had gone far beyond normal, tough questioning, into something that felt vindictive and cruel. Ralph stood up slowly, his chair sliding back slightly. His face was flushed, but his voice remained controlled. Joy, I came here today to talk about a project that I believe can help children. I didn't come here to be personally attacked by someone who clearly has no interest in having an actual conversation. Sit down, Ralph, Joy said dismissively. We're not done here. Actually, Ralph said, his voice now carrying a steel edge that hadn't been there before. I think we are. End quote. I think we are. Actually, Ralph said, his voice now carrying a steel edge that hadn't been there before. I think we are. And Joy leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smirk. What's wrong? Ralph? Can't handle a little tough questioning? Maybe you should have stayed in the dojo where everyone bows to you and calls you sensei. Joy, that's enough, Whoopi said firmly, but Joy wasn't backing down. No, Whoopi, this is exactly what I'm talking about. The moment someone challenges his precious karate narrative, he wants to run away. Real brave, Ralph. Very zen of you. Ralph's hands clenched at his sides. For the first time since the interview began, his famous composure was starting to crack. You know what? Joy? You want tough questioning? Let's have it. But tough questioning isn't the same as being deliberately cruel and disrespectful. Cruel? Joy laughed harshly. I'm being honest about your career. If that feels cruel to you, maybe you need to take a long look in the mirror. My career? Ralph stepped closer to the panel, his voice rising slightly. You want to talk about careers? You've been sitting at this table for decades, tearing down people who actually create things, who actually inspire others. What have you built, Joy? What have you contributed besides negativity and cynicism? The studio audience gasped audibly. Joy's face flushed red with anger. Excuse me? I've been a comedian and television host for longer than you've been relevant. I don't need to justify my career to some washed-up teen actor. Comedian? Ralph shook his head in disbelief. Is that what this is? Comedy? Because I don't see anyone laughing. I see you, using your platform to humiliate a guest who came here in good faith. Sarah Haynes finally found her voice. Maybe we should take a commercial break. No. Joy snapped, pointing a finger at Ralph. He wants to question my career? My contributions? Let's do this. Ralph, you made one good movie 40 years ago. One. Everything since then has been you trying to recreate that moment because you know you'll never top it. Ralph's jaw tightened visibly. Joy, you don't know anything about my life or my work. You admitted you couldn't even watch 10 minutes of a show that's been praised by critics and audiences alike. I don't need to watch garbage to know it's garbage, Joy retorted. Teaching kids to fight? Ralph's voice cracked with frustration. Joy, do you hear yourself? Do you have any idea how many children have written to me over the years, telling me that martial arts gave them confidence to stand up to bullies? That it taught them discipline that helped them in school? That it provided them with a positive outlet for their energy and emotions? Oh, here we go with the fan letters, Joy said mockingly. How convenient. Let me guess. They all say the same thing. Thank you, Ralph, for teaching me that violence solves problems. They thank me for teaching them that they don't have to be victims. Ralph shot back, his voice now loud enough that the entire studio could hear every word clearly. They thank me for showing them that with hard work and dedication, they can overcome obstacles. That's what martial arts is really about. Roudig. When Roudig. Roudig. Joy stood up abruptly, matching Ralph's energy. And what about the kids who get hurt? What about the ones who take your lesson too far and end up in juvenile detention for assault? Do you get letters from them too? That's not fair and you know it, Ralph said, his face now completely flushed. By that logic, we shouldn't teach sports because kids might get competitive. We shouldn't teach music because some musicians become addicts. You're creating a false connection. False connection? Joy's voice was now as loud as his. Ralph, you literally made a movie where the climax is a teenager beating up other teenagers in a tournament. How is that not promoting fighting? Because context matters. Ralph exploded, throwing his hands up in the air. The context was a young man who was being systematically bullied and tormented, who learned not just how to defend himself, but when and why it was appropriate to do so. The tournament wasn't about aggression. It was about proving to himself that he could face his fears. Oh, please, Joy waved her hand dismissively. You can dress it up however you want, but at the end of the day, your big moment of triumph was a kid kicking another kid in the face. Ralph stared at her for a long moment, his chest rising and falling with controlled breathing. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but somehow more intense. Joy, I think I understand what's really happening here. Enlighten me, Joy said sarcastically. You're not angry about martial arts. You're not concerned about children. You're angry because you see someone who's found success and longevity in something you don't understand or respect. And rather than try to understand it, you'd rather tear it down. Joy's eyes narrowed dangerously. Don't you dare psychoanalyze me, Ralph. I've been in this business since before you could spell Hollywood. Then act like it, Ralph said firmly. Act like a professional who knows how to conduct an interview without resorting to personal attacks and deliberate misrepresentation. Misrepresentation? Joy laughed bitterly. I'm stating facts. You're a one-hit wonder who's been coasting on nostalgia for decades. Facts? Ralph's voice cracked again. Joy, Cobra Kai, has been one of the most successful shows of the streaming era. It's been praised for its writing, its character development, and its nuanced approach to redemption and growth. But you wouldn't know that because you couldn't be bothered to watch more than 10 minutes. I don't need to watch hours of something to know it's not for me, Joy retorted. But you do need to watch it before you publicly condemn it on national television, Ralph fired back. You're supposed to be a journalist, Joy. Where's your journalistic integrity? Joy's face turned an even deeper shade of red. You're the one who's been playing the same character for 4 decades because you don't have the range to do anything else. The same character? Ralph shook his head in amazement. Joy. Daniel LaRusso in the original films was a teenager learning about himself and his place in the world. Daniel LaRusso, in Cobra Kai, is a man in his 50s, dealing with the complexities of fatherhood, marriage, business ownership, and the consequences of his past decisions. If you can't see the difference, that says more about your ability to understand character development than it does about my range as an actor. Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to interject. Maybe we could talk about Ralph's other projects. What other projects? Joy cut her off. Name one thing he's done that isn't connected to karate or the Karate Kid. Ralph was silent for a moment, visibly struggling to maintain his composure. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. Joy, I've had a 40-year career in television and film. I've worked on dozens of projects across multiple genres. But even if I hadn't, even if the Karate Kid was the only thing I ever did, it would still be more meaningful than anything you've contributed to popular culture. 7. The studio fell completely silent. Joy's mouth fell open in shock. Excuse me? She whispered. Ralph continued, his voice growing stronger. For 40 years, children and adults have found inspiration in Daniel LaRusso's story. They've learned about perseverance, about standing up to bullies, about the importance of mentorship and respect. What has your career given people, besides cynicism and mean-spirited commentary? Joy's voice was shaking with rage. How dare you come on my show and insult me? Your show? Ralph looked around at the other hosts. I thought this was called The View, not the Joy Behar Hour. But I guess that explains why you feel entitled to attack your guests instead of interviewing them. Whoopi finally stood up. Okay, I think we need to take a step back here. No, Whoopi, Ralph said, not taking his eyes off Joy. I want to hear Joy explain how tearing down other people's work qualifies as entertainment or journalism. Joy leaned forward across the table. At least I'm not a has-been, desperately clinging to past glory. Past glory? Ralph's voice rose again. Joy, Cobra Kai premiered 5 years ago to massive success. My new project is in development with one of the biggest streaming platforms in the world. What exactly about that screams past glory to you? It's all the same thing, Joy shouted. Karate. 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 Don't you get tired of being Daniel LaRusso? Don't you want to be Ralph Macchio for once? Ralph paused, a strange calm settling over his features. You know what, Joy? You're absolutely right about one thing. I am tired. I'm tired of sitting here listening to someone who clearly has no respect for me, my work, or even basic professional courtesy. He took a step back from the panel, his decision clearly made. I came here today excited to talk about a project that could help children develop confidence and discipline. Instead, I've been subjected to a 20-minute character assassination by someone who's more interested in creating controversy than having a meaningful conversation. Joy crossed her arms defiantly. So, what are you going to do about it? Ralph looked at her for a long moment. Then at the other hosts. Then at the cameras. I'm going to do what Daniel LaRusso would do. I'm going to walk away with my dignity intact. Ralph looked at her for a long moment, then at the other hosts, then at the cameras. I'm going to do what Daniel LaRusso would do. I'm going to walk away with my dignity intact. Oh, how noble, Joy said with dripping sarcasm. Running away when things get tough. Real inspiring message for the kids. Ralph stopped mid-turn, his back still to the panel. The studio was so quiet, you could hear the cameras humming. Slowly, deliberately, he turned back around. You know what, Joy? You want to keep pushing? Fine. Let's talk about running away when things get tough. Let's talk about hiding behind a desk and tearing down people who actually put themselves out there. Let's talk about building a career on negativity, because it's easier than creating something positive. Joy's face went pale. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Ralph took a step closer to the panel. 40 years. I've been in this business, Joy. 40 years of auditions, rejections, criticism, and yes, successes. Through all of it, I've tried to create work that means something to people. I create honest television, Joy snapped back, but her voice had lost some of its earlier venom. Honest? Ralph laughed, but there was no humor in it. Joy, you spent this entire interview attacking me for things you made up in your own head. You criticized a show you admit you never watched. You dismissed the positive impact martial arts has had on millions of children worldwide. Where exactly is the honesty in that? Whoopi tried again to intervene. Ralph, maybe we should all just take a breath here. No, Whoopi, Ralph said, his voice now completely steady and controlled. Joy wanted honesty. So, let's be honest. Joy, you're a bully. You use your position on this show to attack people who can't fight back because they're trying to be professional. Well, I'm done being professional. Joy stood up again, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. How dare you call me a bully? What else would you call it? Ralph spread his arms wide. You invited me here under the pretense of an interview, then spent 20 minutes trying to humiliate me on national television. You attacked my character, my career, my values, all while hiding behind your desk and your microphone. If that's not bullying, what is? I was doing my job, Joy said through gritted teeth. Your job is supposed to be asking thoughtful questions and having meaningful conversations with your guests, Ralph replied. Your job isn't to decide before the interview even starts that you're going to tear someone down. Joy pointed an accusatory finger at him. You can't handle criticism. Criticism? Ralph's voice rose one final time. Joy, criticism, would be saying you didn't like the show and explaining why. Criticism would be asking challenging questions about the themes or the messages. What you did was launch a personal attack based on willful ignorance and preconceived notions. He looked directly into the main camera. I want everyone watching at home to understand something. I've been doing interviews for 4 decades. I've dealt with tough questions, hostile journalists, and critics who genuinely disliked my work. But I've never, in all that time, encountered someone who seemed more interested in creating conflict than having a conversation. Joy slammed her hand on the table. Don't you dare turn this into a victim narrative. Ralph turned back to her one last time. I'm not a victim, Joy. I'm just someone who knows when he's wasting his time. He began removing his wireless microphone. And I've clearly been wasting my time here. Ralph, please. Sarah Haynes said softly, speaking for the first time in minutes. Sarah, you seem like a lovely person, Ralph said as he unclipped the mic pack from his belt. Alyssa, Whoopi, you've always been professional and respectful, but I won't sit here and let someone use me as a punching bag for their own issues. Joy's voice was shaking with rage. My own issues? What issues? Ralph paused, the microphone in his hand. Joy, I honestly don't know what I did to make you so angry. Maybe you had a bad experience with martial arts as a kid. Maybe you just decided you didn't like me before I even walked in here. But whatever it is, it's your problem, not mine. He set the microphone on his chair and straightened his jacket. I hope someday you figure out how to channel that anger into something constructive, instead of using it to hurt people who are just trying to do their jobs. Joy stood there speechless, her face red with fury and embarrassment. Ralph nodded to Whoopi. Thanks for having me on, Whoopi. I'm sorry it ended this way. Ralph? Wait. Whoopi called out. But Ralph was already walking toward the exit. Don't let him leave like this. Joy called out desperately. This makes me look bad. Ralph stopped at the edge of the set and turned around one final time. Joy, you made yourself look bad. I just refuse to help you do it to me too. And with that, Ralph Macchio walked off the set of The View, leaving behind a stunned studio audience and a panel of hosts who sat in uncomfortable silence as the cameras continued to roll. The last thing viewers saw before the emergency commercial break was Joy Behar sitting at the panel table, staring at the empty guest chair with a mixture of shock and indignation, while the other hosts exchanged worried glances and the studio audience murmured in amazement at what they had just witnessed. What do you think? Did Ralph handle this situation the right way, or should he have stayed and continued to defend himself? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. Let me know, do you think Joy Behar crossed the line? Or was she just doing her job as an interviewer?